invited me to talk about this book, immediately I said, fine. I already read some of the papers before they were published, and I thought I would be very glad talking about it. But then I realized that I am a philosopher and not a politician, active or inactive. And how could I approach a book which includes almost 20 articles, most of them longer, thinking about this question and reading the book? The book was enjoyable. Finding an answer to the question was not so enjoyable. Exploiting an international political climate that made all sides concerned, and I'm talking about Greece, Turkey, the US, the EU, the Turkish Cypriots, and the Greek Cypriots, made such all these sides concerned favorable towards a solution. The UN engaged the two sides in a series of negotiations that eventually, as we all know, led to the so-called Fifth Annan Plan. The results of the referenda are well known. In short, the international political climate couldn't have been any better for a settlement of the Cyprus problem. In a conscious effort to avoid any prophesizing, at least since 1974, there was no better climate for a solution. All parts were in favor of a solution, and the only part that couldn't speak its mind during the process, but only after the dish was ready to be served, was the Greek Cypriot community. Their verdict defies an explanation based solely on political logic, and to some extent it dumbfounds the rational mind, at least to the extent that we can apply rationality to political life. The questions that stem from this result can be laid out in layman's terms. What are the key factors of influence for the Greek Cypriot verdict? Why did the Greek Cypriots overlook the value of the opportunity for peace that lay in front of them? Why was there no political pragmatism involved in the Greek Cypriot verdict? No doubt, these questions and many more are addressed from various perspectives in illuminating ways by various contributors to Reunifying Cyprus. We should show the book by VARNAVA and FAUSTMANN. The book is valuable reading for anyone who wishes to understand the recent happenings in the history of Cyprus. It has taught me many valuable bits and pieces of the perpetuation of the Cyprus problem. But it has also taught me that what is missing from our attempts to understand the recent happenings is a comprehensive and theoretical model that addresses these questions without focusing solely on rational decision-making, in the sense of exercising solely a political logic to the facts in order to pursue our interests. The VARNAVA and FAUSTMANN edition was among a series of readings that has led me to apply such a model and thus try to shed some light to the logic of the recent history of Cyprus. I shall attempt to sketch it for you, primarily because I think it provides a framework inside which to place the readings of this book. Just a few moments ago, Nikos suggested how do I read the book now? How do future generations read it? That is behind my thinking too. How do I read this book now? How shall I read it in 10 years' time to come? I will give you my theory of this. A good starting point is the following general model, which I call ideological social apparatus. This notion is quite suitable for understanding how ideology works in the case of conflict. I could generalize it and talk of how ideology works in any case. wish to focus on conflict here. And at least it can help us understand the notion of ideology through a first approximation. The model can be summarized as follows. A number of social institutions function as part of the apparatus by which an ideology is formed, maintained, or transformed. These institutions are, firstly, the religious, secondly, the educational, the family, the legal, the political, the trade union, and the communication media, and finally, something which goes unsuspected, the culture. My argument is that the way these institutions operate in the case of Cyprus enforces an ideology that perpetuates conflict. Given the peculiarities of the Cyprus situation, I choose to exclude the fourth and the sixth, that is the legal and the trade union, because of complexities involved in the analysis. So I will try briefly to focus on the other six. Now, most of these things are well known to most of you, but within this theoretical framework that I'm trying to build and how these influence an ideology that, to address an issue raised by Mr. Markidis a few moments ago, why is something self-evident and the person is impossible to see it? He cannot think of something in a certain way. We have to go around politics in order to answer such questions, to address them. And I think the issue of ideology is very important in addressing these issues. Now, take the case of the Greek Orthodox Church. The influence on society is well known to all of us. During the months that preceded the referendum, the Church took a solid stance against the Annan Plan and preached that the plan was unjust to the Greek Cypriot cause, calling the Greeks to oppose it and vote against it. Chrysostomos made a comment earlier saying judgment comes from a perspective. What Greek Cypriots consider to be unjust is just their own view of justice. It's based on the notion of justice. It's not something God-given. It's something created within the state. And of course, who creates these notions? The institutions that form the ideology. The Church, at the same time, cultivated the idea long before 2004 that the Greeks of Cyprus suffer injustices from the great powers of the world, as opposed to the Turks of Cyprus, thus promoting feelings of distrust and insecurity that are obviously multiplied in the presence of conflict. By exploiting its position of authority and the innate insecurities of the Greek Cypriots, it was not difficult to contribute towards an ideology within Cyprus that does not allow careful and objective evaluation of the political and other social realities of the present time. Furthermore, the Church's influence permeates to a large extent almost all other influential institutions, namely the family, the educational, the cultural, and to some extent the political. Take the educational institution. It has identified itself since 1974 as that institution that will preserve the Greek spirit alive in a hostile environment, hostile to Greekness. It has consistently promoted an ideology that nourishes on conflict, which makes the individual identify with the system of beliefs of the Greek Cypriot community. This by no means is an understatement. The individual or individuals that do not share the common system of beliefs are considered alien, if not in a chauvinistic manner, but as outsiders who do not and cannot suffer with the group because their feelings towards the motherland are not considered as genuine and strong. Take the family institution. Its two primary social functions are, on the one hand, just like in almost every capitalist society, it is the economic unit of society. On the other hand, and most importantly for our purpose, explanation, it can better be conceived as an interaction between two or more institutions. Education and family interact with each other, supporting each other, and together promoting the common system of beliefs. Neither of the two institutions can be directly connected to the 2004 outcome, but indirectly, both were catalytic in the creation of public opinion in a bottom-up way, something that misses our political discussions in Cyprus. We all think that everything came from Papadopoulos. Of course, much came from him, but in bottom-up ways, it's the thing that you do not control, and hence more dangerous. You do not control in democracy, hence more dangerous than what we can assume. It is almost self-evident that the operative role of political parties, well, I think we are all politically educated here, so I'm going to skip the influence of on ideology of the political parties and of Papadopoulos. I'm going to be trivializing matters, and I think we are all aware of what I have here, just for time purposes. If you like, we can talk about it later on in the discussion. Let me move on to the communication media. An overwhelming majority of the communication media, both public and private, which for long had been participating in the stage in almost the same manner as the educational system, was on the side of the president, I mean Papadopoulos, and the entire opposition to the Annan Plan in the 2004 referendum. Mr. Markidis is a witness to this. He can tell us much more. The projection of the ideas emanating from the presidential palace was methodical and systematic, as opposed to those arguments that supported the plan that were undermined by epithets that had no political value but appealed to sentiment alone. No doubt the role of the mass media was vital in reminding the Greek Cypriot public of the dictates of the conflict ideology peculiar to our country. And finally, the cultural institutions, that is, the arts of all kinds. I'm involved in an art myself, of some sort. The cultural institutions present a case of utmost interest to me. An entire generation of Greek Cypriot painters, musicians, poets, writers, and generally artists of all kinds have devoted their lifetime creations to keeping alive three primary components of human emotion: the injustice done to the Greeks of Cyprus, the crimes committed by the Turkish army during the 1974 invasion of the island, and the obligation of every Greek Cypriot to keep the Greek spirit alive on the island until every single person returns to the place from which he or she was routed out by the Turkish army. The latter, of course, is a highly admirable human cause that inspires the respect of all people, armed with an appropriate dose of human sensitivity. But that is not the issue in this argument. The cultural institutions have patently, although indirectly, participated in the above ways in enhancing the conflict-based ideology of the island. Probably the most striking observation in relation to the process of internalization of the conflict ideology is in regards to the younger generations of Cyprus. I worked with them all my life, all my mature life. Empirical studies conducted recently on the island concluded that Greek Cypriot youths have internalized far greater fears of reconciliation, more nationalistic feelings have become incorporated into their ideology, not just certain opinions, but deep inside their heart. And they are less likely to accept the reunification agreement of the island. In fact, it appears that the perpetuation of conflict ideology through the institutions I have just discussed in this paper finds younger generations more susceptible and more vulnerable, as one might expect, for such an ideology to be cultivated and indeed flourish. My argument is that these aspects of the Greek Cypriot society are in fact facets of an ideology that derives from conflict and thrives on conflict. We invoke them in order to show how their synthesis nurtures the conflict ideology, and how that ideology in its turn creates a sort of Weltanschauung, a way of looking at the world, a world view that does not allow the Greek Cypriot public to objectively observe, evaluate, and weigh the political characteristics of a situation that will determine its own future. No doubt there are numerous exceptions to all my claims, ranging from priests who do not participate in the hardline ideological agenda of the Church, but rather promote an ideology for peace and coexistence for all the peoples of Cyprus, to educators who consciously refuse to take part in promoting feelings of enmity towards the Turkish Cypriots, to families that consciously promote non-nationalistic feelings towards the Turks, to politicians who desperately promote a pragmatic stance in political decision-making, independent of approaches that belong to long gone-by times. We have one present. To mass media that consciously do not abide by the rule that repetition makes belief. To artists and intellectuals that have long resisted the general attitude and systematically contributed in ways that assist the liberation of the imagination of Greek Cypriots from the specter of the enemy. The exceptions, however, remain exceptions.